Industrialization began in the 1920s. It was following the First World War, and people were anxious to live excessively, which is exactly what they did. There was a huge economic boom due to the migration of workers to the northern cities. Industrialization's main causes were technology, migration, and changes to the farming industry. The U.S. was experiencing an abundance of natural resources and saw this era as a time to use them all up at once. This cartoon shows the hardship that farmers went through during the 1920s. This photo shows men in Texas at an oil refinery getting out the natural resources. During the Great Migration, many poor whites and African Americans migrated out of the racist South and into the cities of the North. There were many job opportunities which attracted people from all over the nation. Most Americans were happy to have such an abundance of wealth and freedom, especially following World War I. But many Americans in the South were hit hard by the lack of work in the small towns. Low taxation was one of the policies that Taft used during this era. People in the government believed that if citizens had enough money of their own, they would be able to reinvest in the government, thus stimulating the economy for the whole country. Trusts were huge companies that monopolized the industry. This forced other companies out, making life very hard for the average American worker. Wilson and Taft believed that individual citizens knew better than the companies did. This idea was called laissez-faire. Laissez-faire was invented by the economist Karl Marx. Canadian farmers quickly became better and were able to push out the American farmers. The total amount of income dropped by nearly $10 billion, and farmers overproduced many crops, losing even more thousands. Many new techniques were developed during the industrialization of the U.S. Big businesses utilized sophisticated sales techniques, marketing, and new methods of transportation to appeal to the new American way of life. These techniques helped them grow and prosper, while other Americans suffered to survive. Mom and pop companies were pushed aside by the bigger and better companies who could afford things, like Henry Ford, who could afford bigger and better models. Technology became even better in the 1920s. Cars became easier to produce and buy for both rich and poor buyers, and telephones gained great popularity. Typewriters helped get women into the marketplace as secretaries. In 1928, women coal workers in North Carolina went on strike because they were being paid 50% less than men were. During this era, the minimum wage was $48 a week, and women in this mine were making $9. After this strike, women across the country began fighting to gain the same rights and pay that men were. Women were best suited for these jobs because they would do anything that the men wouldn't do, and because so many men had died during the war and were later shifted out to more wars, there was an excess of women and a default of men. Industrialization impacted the future because it brought us new and more effective technology. The new jobs and services that developed during this era have continuously helped the country.